A portion of this video is sponsored by the OnePlus 10T. This could have altered the future of tech channels as a whole. It almost killed my business. It left me pretty much broke, scared, kind of unsure what the next steps were. And it's a story, though, that I think I really want to tell. We had told a story about Apple blacklisting me. It felt very cathartic to share that story, and you guys seem to enjoy it. But there's another story that goes back to 2011 that almost changed not only sort of tech sites, but also almost ended my career, almost bankrupted me, and made me terrified of what would be in store the next day. So if you guys will indulge me, I like to tell the story of how I got sued. This is the most unforgettable phone for me. It's a Droid Bionic. Most people probably have no idea even what it was or even cared about it. But it came close to ending me before I ever had a chance to build what I wanted to. YouTube at the time was a very different place. The iPhone 4S was gonna come out that year. Tech YouTube wasn't as crowded as it is. For me, I was only about 5 years into my online career or thereabouts, and I was running a website talking about tech called TechnoBuffalo that I owned and was taking most of my time. And on TechnoBuffalo website, we had like a tips thing where it said, you can email us your tips. We had some crazy wording we shouldn't have had out there. Send us your tips. And I got an email from that essentially was, hey, I've got pictures of the packaging for the Droid Bionic. This was a phone that hadn't come out yet. I'm not even sure it was even announced yet at that point, but it listed all the specs, had pictures of the device. It essentially was like, here is the entire phone. And as somebody running a tech website, that is like striking gold. So I did what anybody on a tech website would do. I got somebody inside of Motorola to confirm it, and we ran the story. And I was pretty proud of myself. Naive, but pretty proud of myself. Very quickly, after that article went up, I got a phone call from the printing company. And the printing house is based in Chicago. That part matters. Called John Burns. I believe they're still out. And they wanted to know who my source was. And right on their website, we had verbiage up there that says, like, we'll fight to protect your source. I fancied myself a untrained journalist. And I felt very strongly about defending the identity. Now I can say now. The source ultimately ended up being, I won't mention names, but the son of an employee that was there on the weekend, saw these things being printed, took pictures and sent them to me because he liked the website. And they wanted me to reveal my source. I very politely told them, not a chance. And I believe about 48 hours later, I had a knock at my door at home on a weekend. And I had an officer of the court and a police officer there serve me papers that I was getting sued to reveal my source. I have never been sued before. I've certainly been threatened many times, but I have never been sued before. And it was a terrifying experience. My wife answered the door, police officer standing there, asking to speak to Jonathan Rettinger, handed the paperwork, telling me I'd been served. It was a really scary time. My perspective back then was I was barely treading water, keeping TechnoBuffalo running, and trying to make videos. I was having a hard time making payroll each month. I certainly did not have the resources to fight a lawsuit. So it was, just on that aspect, it was a really scary experience to go through. But they also, in addition to me, were suing Google and suing AT&T. Google, because they thought Google could have access to my emails, and the emails would tell them the source. And AT&T, because that was my cell phone provider at the time, they thought they could get into my cell phone and give them the source. Those were both shot down very quickly, and I was the one left in the crosshair. I'm gonna take a little bit of a break from this emotional roller coaster, and I wanna share just a bit of good news. Ladies and gentlemen, OnePlus is back with the OnePlus 10T, packing all the things that you'd expect from a OnePlus flagship phone. You want 120 hertz display? Check. You want a triple camera system on the back? Check. You want a 50 megapixel main shooter on the back? Check. You want fast charging that can go from 0 to 100% in 20 minutes? You know OnePlus has your back, but one check mark that's been missing is the ability to get full 4G and 5G on every major US carrier, but now you can check that box as well. The OnePlus 10T will support 4G, 5G on AT&T, on Verizon, and on T-Mobile, so you are good to go. And if you want to get your pre-order on, they're starting on September 1st and a run until September 28th. And during that time, you can get a free protective case or an 80-watt car charger with the purchase of the 16-gig 256 variant version. If you want to check out the OnePlus 10T, order one, pick it up for yourself, all that good stuff, we'll put a link to it down below. After the phone call where they wanted to reveal the source, a couple weird things happened. So we had writers on the site that started getting emails from people that were like, hey, I'm a fan of the site. Can you tell us what you do to protect sources? And it seemed like very leading, trying to figure out what we were doing to make sure we were following journalistic procedures. It was obviously either their attorneys or the printing house or Motorola. And I'm like, something weird's going on here. Fortunately, the writers let me know that this seems odd. I, again, never filed a lawsuit before. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have an attorney. So I just Googled attorneys nearby and found out that if the lawsuit was filed out of state, I had to hire an attorney out of state. So I took what money that I would have paid myself that month and hired an attorney based in Chicago. And essentially the whole gist was a very polite 2 middle fingers. We were asked to adhere on the website to journalistic standards. So we had to make sure we were quoting sources properly. We were verifying sources to make sure anything that went published, but we weren't getting any of the constitutional protections that journalists get to not reveal sources. Now this company, John Burr, essentially was like, you ain't a journalist. This is a website. This doesn't count. This is a blog. You are not a newspaper. You are not the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, anything else. You do not get those protections. And it seems crazy now because obviously websites are protected, but back then it wasn't a thing that could happen. So I hired an attorney, told him, I'm a journalist, I'm protected, you can politely F off. We use nicer language than that. And the Judge Panter, I always remember his name, essentially came back and said, nope, you are not protected, you are not a journalist, you have to reveal your source. And at this point I had to make a decision. Did I want to reveal the source? And now there was a court case that was out that established precedents. So other websites would have had to reveal sources as well. In fact, Pocket Now got a cease and desist letter from, I believe, Motorola as well, citing this court case as precedents for them having to reveal their source. This would have been a real blow to now the burgeoning online industry at the time. I was devastated. I remember sitting on a bench outside of my parents' house, and I was just crying. I didn't know what to do. I was running out of money. First of all, this lawsuit was going to end my business. I was going to be unable to pay myself, my employees. I felt really strongly about this, and I had asked myself if I was prepared to be in contempt of court and go to jail for it. I was asking questions like how long I would have to be in jail for. That's a crazy scenario for running a story on a cell phone that was forgotten, a few months later. So my first line that I had before I got to that point was I could file an appeal. But before you can do an appeal, you have to do something called a motion for reconsideration, which is legal talk for essentially asking the judge, come on, bro. So we did that, and we cited a bunch of other court cases for why we should be protected, and then we just had to wait for the judge. And to my surprise, the judge actually granted us the motion, and after, I think it took about 6 months, this lawsuit was over. Now I had to agree to not sue the printing company for reimbursement of legal costs, and this whole thing was done. And it wrapped up. It's a very scary time, and I was left victorious, and I felt vindicated, and I felt good about what I was doing, but I was also left pretty much broke. And it was just, I remember thinking nobody would ever know if I revealed the source or not. The guy probably would have gotten fired, and that would have really affected his family. I'm not saying this to try to pat myself on the back, but I remember having these ethical questions with myself. Would I be okay with myself if I did this? Nobody would know. I'd be able to, still keep my business running and hopefully forget about it down the road. It was one of the hardest decisions that I ever had to make professionally. as we got there. Now, I made a lot of mistakes along the way. The verbiage on the website that was encouraging people to send tips, it was probably not appropriate, but I learned a lot about the legal system. I learned a little bit about myself during this, but I'm getting to the point where I love to tell some of the stories of things that I've seen, things that I've been through, and maybe things that you guys don't know. Because the tech world that you see right now is not the tech world that it's always been. And there are a lot of things that came before to get us to where we are now. You know, to get Tech YouTube to where it is, you had to have the MKBHDs, John Morrisons, and Austin Evans to get to that point, the Mark Watsons of the world. And to get websites to be protected and to be able to run as journalistic entities, we had to go through these hurdles in the early stages. We had to go through these lawsuits. And I feel very proud that I was on the early edge of this. I feel proud that I fought it. If I had kids and I was going through this, I don't think I could have made the same decisions that I was able to make at the time. So I guess a blessing in disguise there. And I've got a lot of these stories that I want to share over the next months and years. And this is one of the larger ones that really impacted me, my life, and ultimately my career. So I'm not going to lie, there is a little bit of pride that comes into knowing that we outlasted Motorola. And I can't verify this, but I have my suspicions that Motorola, this is old Motorola, like when they were independent, was the one that was pushing the printing company to find out who the source was. But, bink, point John.